My name's Frank Cabanas. I want to thank Darlene and the South End Initiative for having us out here. And I'm going to stand over here.
Okay.
Is that all right? This thing is just in my,
Oh, yeah.
right in my ears. So the reason I got in this race, I live in the southwest part of the city, and you know, just seeing how we're, you know, really underrepresented, like probably I'm sure the same ways it is in the southeast. There's definitely a very real disconnect. I'm a painter by trade. I work for Two Dudes Painting Company. So I get to see the other side a lot, working in these areas, and there's definitely two worlds in Lancaster. I get to see the kind of the people that run Lancaster City, and it's just definitely a different world than what I live in and what a lot of my neighbors live in. Yeah, that's better. We got some of the bass down. Okay. So yeah, that's why I got in this race. I mean, when I talk to different people, I mean, there's definitely a lot of concern with, you know, you ride down St. Joseph Street, and there's potholes everywhere, but now we got these pretty, you know, little bike pictures, so we know where to ride our bicycles, you know what I mean? And, you know, I'm raising my 3 kids, and you know, that's the least of my concerns, is seeing bike lanes everywhere and this and that. I mean, that's all right if you have, you know, skinny jeans and the latest Fleet Foxes on vinyl, you know, riding down the street. But not saying there's anything wrong with that, but at least in my world, that's just not one of my top priorities. So I got in this race to not be a rubber stamp for every single project that's going on downtown. We don't need every bit of our money going on downtown, and on, you know, Cabbage Hill should matter as much as Chestnut Hill. It really should. We shouldn't have whole neighborhoods that are left behind just because, and even many times there's people outside of the city from the county that are, you know, that are major parts of what's going on here, you know? So anyway, thanks again for this time. Thanks for everybody. Thanks to Cindy Stewart. I'll be voting for her on Tuesday as well. So.
All right. My name is Paul Colbreth. I'm a lifelong resident of Lancaster City, born and raised here, product of the school district of Lancaster. Married, 4 children, 7 grandchildren. I was going to say recently retired, but I retired 3 years ago from Thaddeus Stevens College of Technology. Then I had taken on the duties of grandpop duties. Until grandmom retired, then it switched. When I retired, I was the director of multicultural affairs and student engagement at the college there. And one of the reasons that I'm running is that on the surface, Lancaster appears to be this hustling, bustling, robust, forward-moving city. And if you take a trip downtown, you'll see why it gets all the accolades about the art and things of that nature. It's great. But if you take a couple blocks, you know, south or west of downtown, it's a whole different story. You know, you'll see, you know, unprecedented signs of neglect, poverty, despair, and a host of other ills that impact urban areas that have been neglected. The southeast and southwest, they appear to be the stepchild here in the city's priorities. So I stepped into the race because as I looked over the previous candidates and the newer candidates that they are putting forward, I was concerned about their knowledge about our city. How many of those individuals have had boots on the ground in these communities to really understand what is actually happening in these communities. And then I listen and see the mayor promoting the study that said that they had eliminated homeless. Well, if he comes down here in the afternoon and looks across the street, he'll see a couple of them sleeping on the lawn over here at the Hill Rise. So things like that. And as long as they can keep their statements and everything within their confined areas, their little groupthink process, they feel comfortable with it. But if they're out here experiencing these communities, moving throughout these communities, they'll understand that, some attention needs to be given. So I'm running on the issue of social justice. And my thing is that if one part of this city is not whole, then the whole city is not whole. And again, I want to thank South Ann Street Concerned Neighbors, because they took it upon themselves to move the issue and get some attention for the Southeast and Southwest. Thank you. I guess the process moving forward is a meet and greet, or are we taking questions from individuals? Uh-oh. Yeah, I know.
Okay, Paul, everything that you guys said and what you just spoke about is a very important issue to me also. Being the fact that there is homeless people and the Southeast area is not, well, I should say quote unquote, not as well kept up by the city as the other part of this town or the part of the city. What can or what will you do or try to do to change that fact so we can, the homeless would get, there's not as many homeless or no homeless, and improve our Southeast area? What will you do?
What would I do? Sheesh. Well, there's a host of things that need to be done. Because one of the things that really concern me with the amount of job training that's available. There's job training here, there, and everywhere, but there's no jobs to take them to for that population that you're training. So the training, the jobs need to, mirror the training. The social services agencies that would step in to help those individuals that you see homeless, sometimes they just don't know where to go. But those social agencies nowadays, are withering on the vine. They're barely staying alive themselves. What we need to do is to, take a look at some of those funding sources that has been eliminated, like the CDBG fund, block grant funds. There's always used to be a block of money in there, $500,000, that was used for the social service agency so that they can continue that work that's so badly needed. Every year they kept pulling monies from that area to use it as overtime for the police department and increased monies for the fire department and stuff like that. But the social service aspect has always been, something that they turned a blind eye to. Urban League, which was once a bustling organization that did job training and employment and things of that nature, no longer exists. And a host of other ones. Brothers and sisters pulled up. What is the city's, culpability in helping them to sustain and thrive here in this community? And it needs to happen. We need to look at how can we support these agencies that are doing the work, where the rubber meets the road. That's the difference between, downtown and here.
On the subject of homelessness, some of the research I've read, most homeless people are temporarily homeless. I mean, the experience is so bad that they make sure it never happens again. In fact, I have neighbors and friends who have been homeless at one time or another. So sometimes we have the idea of sometimes people being homeless for years and years and years, and there is that group. But overall, coming from the construction trades, I know for a fact everybody right now is like, they are desperate for labor. But, and so we have plenty of people that need jobs in the city. I would like to bring in some of my friends, even out in the county, that could help train in carpentry, some of these practical skills. I know where I work, they're desperate for labor. And so there is an abundance of jobs out there in the construction industry. Sometimes, you know, it can be hard work or whatever, but there can be some promising opportunities. And I would like to, you know, be a part of that, is, you know, somehow that cooperative. I mean, I'll be honest, listen, there's a lot of people out in the county, they're afraid to come in the city, but if they're invited, you know, when you grow up out in the country, you just don't go in the city. But if they're invited, you know, like, listen, bring your tools in. They'll have like $10,000 worth of tools. Let's have a Saturday, start somewhere. And these companies, they're so desperate, they just need someone who can show up and just come to work every day. That's the starting point. They're not necessarily looking for you to be an all-star. I mean, trust me, they're desperate for labor right now. I mean, the market in building, construction, even just locally, is enormous, and even now going out to towards Philadelphia. So that would be my solution. And again, with the homeless situation, I'm not dismissing. I'm just saying, I think improving on the job situation and finding those people who are really temporarily, listen, we don't want to ever go back to that. You know, we don't want to deal with the bed bugs, that, you know, all this crazy stuff. You talk to friends of mine that have been homeless, I mean, it's a complete nightmare, so.
I know you noticed that you're talking about homeless, and I'm not going to say where I worked, but I worked in a place where there was, we would see a lot of homeless in the place that I worked. But they weren't from Lancaster City. They were from other places, because they knew that if they came to Lancaster, that they could get taken care of better. Now, how would you solve something like that? I mean, I know you don't want to take people and say, oh no, you don't belong to this city, so we can't help you. And, you know, I've seen them helping people, but the people who are homeless here that have been here for more than a year, I would think that you would put them before the people who are just coming from other places. So what do you think, what's your view on that?
As you take a look at the homeless situation, and you're probably talking about some of the shelter type programs that are supposed to, you know, temporarily house individuals. One of the problems that they had in the past, you know, you got to have history in this, because you got to know where you came from before you know where you're going. Crispus Center was a homeless shelter, had a major homeless shelter here. And it was thriving, and it had its ups and downs and stuff like that. But then the bureaucratic process got involved with it, you know, and they started pulling funds from Crispus Attucks and reducing the services, and thereby automatically eliminating the shelter program here. And I'm not saying that was good or bad. There were some pros and cons to the whole thing. But because they've seen the population, the homeless population, which is a transient population, and a lot of the chronic individuals in those programs know how to move around the system, move around the shelters, from Harrisburg through Lancaster, and around. And they know how to navigate these services. They know that I can stay 30 days here, I can stay 60 days here, and things of that nature. So, it was incumbent upon the individuals that worked at these shelters to start to understand and track these individuals, and figure out the individuals that are, abusing, what was being offered. Then you had a whole host of individuals in the shelters that were there temporarily that would access the services that were attached to it, the job training, and the things of that nature that were attached to the shelters. And some of those people did step out to step up. But I think the situation with the homeless, with individuals in that program, you have to definitely do some social work in there. But a lot of times, again, because of lack of funding, you don't have true social workers in those programs. You just have workers who are just babysitting these individuals until they move on. But you really need individuals in there that understand what it's like and what they need to do to get them on that first rung of that ladder. Because if you can get them on that first rung of that ladder of self-sufficiency, then you're doing something. But if you can't, they're just going to move around the shelters.
Yeah, I would agree with Paul. If they're, if you have an able-bodied man, he's not willing to go out and work out. The old school was if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. That may sound harsh, but I get out and work all kinds of crazy hours to feed starving children, my own. And, it's hard out there, and it can be discouraging sometimes. We face all kinds of challenges, from just trying to keep the water on, trying to keep the mortgage company off our backs, trying to, all this other stuff, just trying to get by, trying to make it happen. And I had a friend of mine, one of my neighbors was, he was telling me, he's like, well, we need to have more shelters for men in the city. And he's a nice enough guy. He doesn't like working. Okay, I'm just saying, and it's not a race thing. It's more white guys than anything that I've seen. But as simple as that, you don't feel like getting a job, especially the men, and your baby mama's working 3 jobs because you're lazy. You know what I mean? You need to get your butt out there and work. I don't want to see these child care services are outrageously expensive. It's just heartbreaking seeing this. Trust me, in the wintertime when it's gotten slow, I've delivered for Pizza Hut. You know what I mean? So I live in this. We live in this world. So I see this. We experience this, and so I would agree with Paul.
Also, one of the things that you definitely have to look at when you're talking about that population, the population that we are referencing, is that the housing stock in Lancaster City, is another thing to really be of concern. Because if you take a normal house in a neighborhood, and if you have a $150 mortgage on that house, then you're gonna, per month, that's your mortgage, but then you probably have about $380 worth of city taxes, per month on that house. So before you can rent that house to a neighborhood individual, you're starting out at $600 that you have to rent this house to these individuals. But there's no profit on there as a landlord. There's no upkeep money that you can pull out of there. And the only way that you can survive is rent a house to a Section 8 person, where the government is footing most of that bill. And if the taxes weren't so high, the landlords wouldn't have to gouge the renters. And the renters in the city, if they're making $12 an hour, they're making a lot. So when we talk about homeless, We talk about somebody sitting out in the cove or laying out outside or something, but there's a whole lot of homeless that are living in basements and attics. I seen whole families in one basement in a house. You know, they are homeless. Somebody just out of the goodness of their heart told you can crash here until you can get yourself together. But we're talking about women, children who are going to school. They know what's happening, you know. So these are the things this is why I'm saying you need real social workers doing real social work. You need a real system that is going, if you're going to help somebody out of that situation that they're in, it needs to be a program that can take you from homelessness to self-sufficiency. Any stop on the way, if you drop them off anywhere in that process, they will go back to being homeless. It's a cycle.
Paul, just a quick comment. Number one, you're coming from Thaddeus Stevens. There probably isn't a better school around that can take individuals in and really teach them a trade. Teaching them a trade where there are people like Frank's waiting for them to graduate and putting them in a very, very good paying job. Now, Frank had a rather interesting comment that he made, and I just want to play dreamland here a little bit. If you had people out in the county who need people to work, and I don't know how this would possibly work, but what about a place where you invite people in and you teach them how to use a drill? You show them how to use a hammer. You show them how to use a saw. The trade tools that you want are out there. If you could do that and stimulate that kind of an interest and be able to pay that individual to go to work, I would think that the next real challenge is getting them to the job. And I'm just blowing this idea out. What would happen if your kind of friends in work would actually bring in a van to pick those workers up to take them to the job site? Now you've eliminated the excuse, well, I have no way of getting it. But now you've taught that person, some job skills that you want them to do on your job sites. And all of a sudden, at the end of the week, they're getting paid. And it's like, whoa, this could be fun. So it's sort of like what I'm trying to say about Thaddeus Stevens, but this is sort of like a mini thing. If they get so proficient at it, maybe they want to go then to Thaddeus Stevens. But I'm just throwing this out conceptually because it would take the business people to want to set up weekend workshops, invite the people, whatever age, doesn't matter, teach them how to use the tools that they would use on a job site, and then turn around and say, fellas, we're going to be at such and such a place at 6 o'clock in the morning. I have room for 6 people. You're going to get paid whatever per hour, and we're going to get you to the work site and bring it back. I don't know if it would work or not.
Yeah.
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
I want to piggyback on what he's saying, and I think you have a great idea. But I really do believe that we're missing a lot here. We're not addressing the we address the homelessness, but we don't understand how to get there. We get there through drug and alcohol, through mental health issues, jobs, affordable. Right now, we talk about training people, tradesmen, but we have people that aren't going to tradesmen.
That's
And
okay.
they have to work in the service departments. Lancaster County has become more service oriented.
Yes, they have.
So unfortunately, they're at a wage. and they can't afford. There's no affordable living. There's no affordable housing here in the city for them to live. Unfortunately, as a landlord myself, you have to raise the cost of the rent because of the taxes and everything else that we're up against. So getting back to jobs, why are we not trying to empower our people to work within our own community? I mean, we don't need to necessarily bus them or take them outside of the city, because when a little kid sees a cousin, an uncle, a dad, working on property on South Ann Street,
I understand.
rehabbing it, it's a effect. It's a domino effect.
Yeah.
And now everyone becomes very, very prideful of their community. So I don't understand why somehow or another we don't come up with a program where we can somehow train our people, or city people that need some type of guidance and training, to learn how to revitalize their own city, their own neighborhood, because it's going to be such a powerful effect. You know, it's a win situation for everyone. And then we don't have that transportation issue.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
We don't have that transportation issue because now they can just get out and walk to where they need to go.
But-
It's just when it's in sight and you can see it, it's a powerful situation. So I'm just hoping somewhere along. I know the city.
I think we're trying to
I know
get to the
city
same
does.
thing.
I know the city. It's the same, but it's visible. It amongst many other people, not just the 6 or 8 people you take out to the county. It's visible with all those who are around watching. Now you don't throw a stone or a rock through that window because we helped build it. You know, when you bring in outside contractors to come into the city to rehab, I think the city has a rehab program where all the contractors, none of them are from Lancaster City, Lancaster, none of them from the people in it. So people come in, and then they wonder why some of the properties get vandalized. Because they're waiting for work, but they can't get it. I know as an electrician, I'm an electrician. When I started, I put my resume out to all contractors. Hey, I'm an electrician. But they had their own group of guys that they hired. They never hired within the inner city, so I became a general contractor. And I was very good at it. But unfortunately, there's not enough. There's not enough people. Because there's a lot of people here in the city that already do have a trade or have some type of knowledge of tools. Unfortunately, they don't have the transportation to get to the jobs. And they don't have the people that will empower them around them. And we need to keep them busy in the neighborhood.
Also, just to piggyback on that, also, most of the jobs are requiring that you have no felonies or priors. And just because the city took it off their application doesn't mean that once they got to the interview, they weren't going to ask them that question. You know, so, you know, that's another thing that is hamstringing a lot of individuals that are out there trying to get a job. Okay.
Yes, in regards to the transportation issues for people going to jobs, I'd like to share a story that happened to me about 3 years ago. I'm a single mother, and I was working one part-time job, trying to work my way to full-time, but it was several miles from my house. I had a little car, cheap little car, got me where I needed to go, it was reliable. But because of the income situation, my insurance lapsed. I'm driving home at 10:30 at night, and I'm pulled over by one of the local police forces. No moving violation. It was an automated plate reader. Pulled my car up as having lapsed insurance. I didn't do anything other than driving the car. I hadn't done anything wrong. That police officer took my license plate, had my car towed, and I never saw it again because they put it in impound and I couldn't pay. I'm working part-time and I couldn't pay the storage charges that Lancaster Fleet Auto charges when they take your car and they put it behind a fence. And transportation was gone. I mean, there has to be, would you be in favor of, say, a local ordinance that would make things like that less likely to happen?
First off, I think, you know, it takes, when I call the police in my neighborhood about a fight, it takes them 45 minutes to get out there, but somehow it took them no time to write you up this ticket. I think, for one, I think the police need to be told to knock it off. You know what I mean? Start paying attention to something that matters. That's ridiculous. And, you know, and that really goes back to what I was talking about before of just trying, a lot of the, and I didn't talk about it tonight, but I've talked about it before, a lot of the harassment in the city with parking and with, you know, all sorts of other issues where you're just trying to get ahead, and there's all these other things blocking you. And also, Dwayne, I wanted to say also that's a good point. There's a lot of contractors and trades in the city. And when I was talking about the county's known for its construction workers, but there's certainly construction, you know, companies in the city as well. And it, you know, it's a tough market. Trust me, I know, as I've been a contractor before, and it's tough getting in to certain groups and certain markets. And you know, when you're slow, everybody else is slow. And then when you're all of a sudden, you know, you're busy, everybody's calling you with like 5,000 different things. So I definitely agree that in the city, it is much more powerful to have people in the city working on it themselves. And, you know, if need be, get people that can train in the city or even come in, you know, there's all sorts of, you know, different options with that.
Now I want to go back to the young lady here was talking about the issue with the police. Yes, yeah, you made a mistake. It was you were driving illegally, but you have to do what you have to do to survive. You know, and people downtown sometimes don't understand that. It's just the law to them. But it goes to a point which really strikes a nerve in me, is the insensitive of some of our public servants. You know, sensitivity or just people skills, good people skills is what they need, customer service skills. We talk about customer service everywhere, but inside of our city administration and our police department, you know, if you go downtown to pay a ticket, you're treated like a second-class citizen in this third-class city. You know, I mean, it was so crazy to hear the lady not accept the change because they didn't feel like counting the money. Things like that. I really think that our service providers or individuals working in throughout the city need to be a little bit more sensitive to the plight of what some of these individuals are going through, because some of them really don't understand how tough it is. I had, you know, I'm always hearing about police officers not de-escalating an issue, escalating issues. You know, just in their way they talk. It's like there's no requirement or no test that they have to take to see if they have people skills. And I think that the new mayor, Cindy, this is really going to be an area that we need to take a look at, which is customer service. And that's not just the police department. I said that's the city, that's your code enforcement individuals. They will write a ticket, you know, without even letting individual know, your grass is 12 inches. You know, okay, how do you know? Did you take a measuring stick? No, I can see it from here. No, come on, you know? Sometimes you can just knock on the door and tell them, hey, do you know that this grass is too high? Or send a letter to the landlord. Sometimes the landlord don't know that the individual didn't cut the grass. So they get a $100 citation in the mail. And what's this for? So now they have to take this $100 citation back and try to squeeze it out of the tenant, which is like trying to get blood from a turnip. It's not going to happen. You know, so I mean, we have some systems out there that really need to be looked at. I think that we've outsourced so much. Parking authorities outsourced. You know, everything is outsourced now. So, okay, if everything is outsourced, then why do we still have all those employees downtown sitting there doing nothing? You know, so, you know, incoming administration may have to take a look at that by doing a time study on all these positions that these individuals are holding down for $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year. You know, that's just my take on it.
And I know in some larger cities, they have ordinances that raise the minimum income. I don't know if does Lancaster have any kind of minimum wage? I meant minimum wage. Does Lancaster have anything like that? And what is your stand on maybe, as it is largely a service economy now, like bringing up the minimum wage?
Oh, I'm all for raising the minimum wage because I know, like everybody else from the neighborhood, that you cannot survive on $7.75 an hour. You know, that's just ludicrous for anybody to believe or think that that can happen. But the problem that you run into again is those who are in charge cutting into their profit. You know, when you raise the income level, you're cutting into somebody's profit. But I don't think the city has an ordinance where there's a minimum wage. I think that, you know, that $7.75 is the minimum wage.
Are you in favor of a city-specific minimum wage?
Oh yes, I am definitely in favor. I thought I said that earlier. That I am in favor of raising the minimum wage here in the city. Especially in light of the fact that the cost of living inside the city is pretty high. Say again?
Do you have a figure in mind?
$9.75 would be good. Then they can, you know, able to pay the rent and get a cheesesteak and pay the phone bill.
So my thoughts are on that is a couple things. So when the state minimum wage was like $5.25, and they raised it, most businesses at the time, even most fast food, paid a couple dollars more than that. When they raised the minimum wage, there was some in the produce industry with special needs that were able to be in the workforce. They weren't able to be in the workforce after they raised those wages. The McDonald's on Water Street, which I go to sometimes, if you raise the minimum wage to whatever, let's say 10, 11 bucks an hour, these larger companies don't have to do anything. Just because you raise that wage doesn't mean they're actually going to pay it. They can automate everything. If that McDonald's gets automated, that's it. And I'm not against them having necessarily a minimum wage raise in the city. Trust me, I've delivered for, local pizza delivery. You get paid, $7 an hour plus tips. I'm right there with you. We all need the money. My solution would be more being inviting to either manufacturing or businesses that that can pay a living wage, and not just these massive hotels that are coming in that are still paying $7 an hour, $8 an hour. Let's be inviting those companies that and even in manufacturing that can pay more. To me, winning is $15, $20 an hour with benefits. And just to go back into the trades, one thing I forgot to mention is overtime. So you have a wage, let's say someone starts out at $12 an hour, well, all of a sudden they're making, closer to 20 with overtime. So there's a lot of opportunities looking at that. So I'm not necessarily against the idea of raising a wage. You just can't force some of these larger businesses to do anything with that wage. And I get my Puerto Rican food from the place on the corner of New Dorwart and Manor Street. These little mom and pop places really can only afford to pay so much, and they will go out of business. I mean, the O&J across the street from my house, a little corner store, another one, there's a lot of these mom and pops, and so it becomes very difficult to differentiate between who can actually afford to pay this rate and who can't. And you know, I can tell you at and again, just to put a plug in for Two Dudes Painting Company, I mean, it's even at an entry level position, there's room to grow on that, and there's room for overtime. And so let's look for those opportunities to bring the companies and the markets that really can afford to pay those wages. So that's where I come from with that.
I just wanna, probably just make some comments, but I heard what the lady said, and South End Concerned Neighbor, one of the things we do as a nonprofit is, we don't have a program. So we would run into individuals like you that would have a need, because our program might not address your need. For you, you needed money for your insurance. That's it. Come on, people, be for real. Yep, we got a program, we got directors making $80,000 a year, and the only thing she needed to continue to keep her job, to take care of her children, was 100 or 200, I don't know how much your auto insurance was, but that. And I think if we're gonna look at the social end of things, what South End has done in the past, which is an all-volunteer organization, is that we look at the individual. And I think, Paul, I think you touched on that a lot when you talked about the social services and making the right connection. I mean, it's what did she need? No, she didn't need to go to a program and do a 90-day training and get skilled and get labor. She needed someone or a source that she could have went to and said, look, I got a job, I'm a single mother, I'm raising my kids, I need $200. You know, as taxpayers, we should be willing to say, here's your $200, move on, not something we're gonna take care of you from now until 2025 because you needed insurance. So one of the things I would hope for out of our mayor and out of our city councils is that you do look at where our money is going. Money that is being put in the social service. Where is the accountability gonna come? Are we gonna just look at outcomes and say, oh, you served 2,000 people, you deserve this money? You know, so we're looking for you to hold people accountable. You know, we understand that, you know, it's gonna be, there's 4 seats open, we got 4 Democrats and 2 Republicans, and depending on how it works out, you'll be a voice. You know, but we need a voice that's really going to stand up, a voice that's going to hold people accountable and represent. There's a lot of things that I think that, you know, like I said, when I look at South End and how we do things, that I wish that, you know, it's something that, you know, invite us to the table, sit down, find out how do we do it. You know, you come out with task force, and I think this is something, city council, as they generate task force, not that it's not a bad idea, but when you ask the person that owns the most property in the city to sit on the task force and tell you how to deal with the housing issue, well, I don't know about nobody else, but we need to, you know, make sure that it's true representation. And that doesn't mean one Afro-American on a board, one Hispanic, one female. If we want to have representation, I think City Council has a voice in who sits on our boards. Why are not more of our boards and commissions in the city representing the city? We all can't, there's only 7 seats on City Council. But there's a lot of people in the city that could be represented on these boards. And we got more than 5 Afro-Americans or 6 Latinos to choose from. The city is overpopulated. We have the same person sitting on 3 different boards. Come on, there's enough people in the city. And we're looking for people that's going to be that voice to represent, represent the grassroots organization in our neighborhoods. And that's how I feel we would get represented. And so that's what we're looking for in our mayors and our city council members, that they would at least, you know, show some more representation and really think about ways, how do we help the person who doesn't need a whole program and don't need a whole lot of tax dollars and a whole organization to develop a program when all she needed was a couple $100, and she couldn't have called 211 and asked them, do you have anybody that would help me pay my insurance? Because they would have told her no. And that's our contact, 211.
Because the social services, you know, and going back, again, the agencies used to control like the Ryan White funds, which would have gave you rent assistant, fuel assistant, you know, the small things that you needed to go. But those, like I said, again, those agencies, they're withering on the vine right now. And so they're struggling to keep their doors open. Places like Crispus Attucks and, you know, and things like that, they, you know, can barely make ends meet. And, but we need to find out where these social dollars are going to, and are we really getting the best bang for that buck? You know, because, you know, our communities are hurting, and we really need to do something about it.
Paul, you said at the beginning that your interest was in social justice, and I'm just curious, philosophically, how do you see yourself as a Republican? Because I tend to think, in my mind, it's the Democrats who are, you know, talking about social justice, and so I'm just curious to hear about your Republican.
And for me, it's really not about the party when it comes to issues about our community and our folks. You know, it's about the people, not about the party. And the reason why I'm a historian, anyways, I'm a historian on the Underground Railroad and stuff like that. So, you know, I still consider the Republican Party the party of my father. So, I still stand on that. However, the way the political landscape is swaying back and forth and all that kind of stuff, you can't really gauge an individual based upon the party. As far as me, social justice has always been an area of concern for me because it's always been NIMBY, not in my backyard. If you go throughout our community, you'll find a whole lot of rehabilitation houses and halfway houses, and they were never, those communities or those blocks were never asked about that, moving that agency or those types of housing things into their neighborhood. They were just placed there. Now, if you try to do that Walnut Street or, you know, Northwest or something like that, it wouldn't happen. You know, they would have to go through it. There'd be a whole lot of red tape. But down here, they just let it go. They just turn a blind eye and a deaf ear. And again, yeah, just go ahead, move in. And so next thing you know, you have, you know, 10 or 20 of them in a 3-block radius. And sometimes it doesn't make for, you know, a really good mix in your neighborhood. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it does. You know, I look at the places like the parks where you see a lot of heroin users getting free needles and then going down there in the open and shooting up. That's happening right here. Kids are seeing it, adults are seeing it, but nobody is doing anything about it. You know, that's why I did hear something in the last mayor debate that really was of interest to me when they said that each council member, each community should have its council member, because then your representation is at that table. And if issues in your community are not being addressed, you have somebody directly to go to. Because right now, if you go to any one of those 7 council individuals, they'll be saying, "Hey, that's not my responsibility. Go talk to Joe or go talk to Frank." You know, they're not going to deal with it. But if you had a representation in your neighborhood sitting there at that table, you have somebody that you can go to.
I could be wrong, but you'd have to have a change in the charter
You would,
Probably.
yeah.
in order to do
Right.
that. And,
You'd have to be
you know, that's
home rule.
easier said than done. It's a great wish, you know, because of the equal voicing. But, and I don't know if I should even mention this, but there's a big issue on this election coming up. And it deals on a state referendum about property taxes.
Oh, yes.
And I'm gonna tell you, a lot of people don't even know what that means. But it's gonna be on there, and it's gonna be voted on, and it's yes or no. And it's a light election time. Not a lot of people, this isn't done during the presidential. we're gonna do this during the local municipalities. I'm just saying, you know, turnout's gonna be low, okay? And I have no doubt in my heart, state legislators put that baby in that slot because they want that, and it has a lot of slippery slopes on it. And, but it inevitably, what could happen is that taxes will be done away with, property taxes. Sorry about
Sets the stage.
housing, okay, not landlords. Landlords still pay. Unless you live in that property. Then you'd be treated. And this is not about, you know, tax relief for the old guys like me, you know, or people who don't have children in school. They can't write it that way. It's either all or nothing. And this, I have no doubt in my heart, this is going to pass because not enough people know about it.
Well, it's been introduced a couple of years ago, because on the school, when I was on the school board, you know, it came up, and you know, I was leaning towards no taxes, no property taxes. However, I would have income tax, income tax. Like New York and everywhere else, they increased their income tax. Now, individuals that are coming into our city is still paying towards our taxes with that raised income tax. If they would raise our income tax, whatever amount needs to be raised to cover the money that we'll lose from our tax, whether it's 2% or a 3% raise on the income tax, it's like 13% in New York. You know, we're a third-class city, but we have a whole lot of visitors that frequent Lancaster City and County. You know, and so some of those individuals can pay a couple dollars more towards our living expenses, I think, with an increase, just a slight increase. All right.
I probably told Darlene that I would, if anyone doesn't know me, my name's Tim Stuhldorf with the Lancaster newspaper. I told Darlene that I would send her some questions, but I didn't. So I guess I'll ask them live and in person.
Make them good.
Pressure's on, Tim.
So two things. Number one, I attended I believe there were 3 city council primary debates, at which we did have everybody. The rhetoric from the Democrats was very similar to yours. They were not saying we need more homelessness and we need fewer jobs and we need less equity. They were kind of on the same page with you guys as far as the reverse of what I just said. Secondly, as city council members, you guys have a relatively circumscribed power. You can pass a resolution, you can pass an ordinance, you can maybe order a study, that's about it. So, 2 questions would be, number one, how do you differentiate yourselves from your Democratic opponents? And number 2, how do you see yourselves using your ordinance power and your resolution power to enact the kinds of changes you want to see?
For the first question, the main way I would differentiate myself is in the sense of I really don't have any loyalty to anybody downtown. I really don't mind getting in a fight, so to speak. Not a physical fight, obviously, but I don't give a rip about cocktail hour or the art galleries or the who's who, and trust me, Lancaster's full of all that. I mean, that goes on all day and all night. I mean, you can always be with the townies and doing all that stuff. And I don't feel, and it's not because it's a party thing specifically, it's not because they're Democrats, I don't necessarily trust that they'll be able to say no to everything that comes down the line from Chestnut Hill, from the rich folks in town. That's where I feel the differentiation is, but it's not necessarily because of the party difference, well, but mainly because of the 3-to-1 registration difference and the kind of people who control Lancaster, which is rich white Democrats. I mean, let's be honest, that's who controls Lancaster. On the second question, I do lean towards limited government approach, and the reason being, you know, for every, I read a book by it was two Russian economists, Shmelov and Popov. They wrote a book about towards the end of communist Russia and all the problems with the Russian economy and all these things. And they talked about regulation, and it's a slippery slope. What starts out as a positive thing can become a really, really negative thing in government. And I just think we have to be really, really careful just passing laws and enacting this and enacting that. And so I do tend to lean more towards limited intervention on some areas. I just think we need to be cautious.
I too agree with Frank in the fact that we need to limit limited government. I think the city is too intrusive into the lives of the folks here. Every time someone would sneeze, they would enact a new ordinance, and any ordinance that was offered up in the previous city council, again, was rubber stamped because there was never going to be any constructive discussion, you know, on these issues, because it was a groupthink process down there, and everyone could see that. If Mayor Gray said it, everybody agreed to it. So, you know, with me, you know, I come with experience, knowledge, and history about these communities, our communities. So if you could tell me this is a sirloin steak and I know it's ground beef, I'm gonna let you know. No, doesn't work like that. So, and this is what we're dealing with right now. They're force feeding us stuff that we know isn't right. When they tell our community, the Southeast area, tell this community that, oh, we're giving you economic development. No, I watch you turn that mound of dirt, I watch you turn it over for 12 years, and each year you told me that a plaza was coming. You know, we went through Keystone, we went through enterprise money, we went through, now we're into the Criz money. Now we finally get something down here, and it's not what we thought we were getting. They just moved the dollar store from one side of the street to the other side of the street. They're gonna move the grocery store from the one block to the other block. Where's the new jobs and economic development and all that kind of stuff you promised us? You know, so, you know, we need to, or city council, along with the administration down there, needs to be held accountable for what they said they were going to do in and through these communities.
We offer a follow-up question, since that leads very naturally to the other question I wanted to offer. Wanted to get your take on 3 issues. Number 1, what do you think should happen with the Criz? There's been a lot of talk about that and making it more available to small business. Number 2, what do you think about building a parking garage at Lancaster Square? And number 3, what do you think about the lead paint ordinance that was discussed at last night's meeting, as Cindy knows?
I'll take the easiest one first. I don't think we need another parking garage. We have enough parking for almost everybody in the city. Second, Criz, the Criz money. I think that the Criz money should have been used for, like PETA money, should have been used for economic development that developed livable wage jobs inside of our communities. And when I say that, it's because I was involved in some of that stuff in the past. Like the Comcast building that was built down, the Comcast building and the Rivet Company that are down here on the south end of Duke Street. Those buildings were, they used CDBG monies, government monies to build those buildings for jobs for community members. To date, I don't think any community members have worked down there. Maybe one or two worked at Comcast. Now, the city has a fiduciary responsibility for helping these communities pick themselves up. So why can't we solicit the Jay's group, so to speak? Why can't they back a couple of tractor trailers? They do fulfillment orders, you know, all over America. Why can't they back a couple of tractor trailers down there and provide some low skill work? Now, and I say that because some of their fulfillment orders, putting 2 screws and 2 nuts in the bag and stapling together. You can back a tractor trailer up there in this piecework, you know. The faster you do the work, the more you make, you know. You actually learn skills, you know, while doing work like that, because you'll look at the guy next to you and he's turning out and he's making $40 a day, you're making 20. You're watching him and say, okay, look, I'm gonna have to pick up my pace, so I'm gonna check out how he's doing it, so I can increase it. And once you get to 40, then you say, yeah, I can make it to 60. But, you know, by the time you be proficient, by the time you are proficient in doing that task, you're ready to move to another job where you can take that task to another level. I just think that those buildings were purchased with government money for specific purposes. But like everything else in these neighborhoods, it starts out as a good thing here, but then they move it or they change it. They started with the Southern Market, the green vegetables for the neighborhood. Right, we're gonna do it up on East King Street. How long did that last, folks? About a year and a half. Then they moved it to Reservoir Park. You know, so you know things like that. You know, our neighborhood, they use our demographics, the condition of our neighborhoods, the poverty level, and all the other ills. They use those numbers to secure monies for this city. But when those dollars come into this city, they go to artwork and things like that, and the poor continue to get poorer. Did I get you all your 3?
Miss
Oh,
one.
lead-based.
But I thought Frank might want to word in.
Oh, yeah, you want you
can answer the
do-
letter. You can answer it.
Lead. Oh, no, lead. Well, you know, the lead-based paint is an issue, but I don't know if we need to take it to that extent. They're saying that it costs $250 to test for lead. Now, I don't think it would cost that much if the city would train individuals to do the lead testing. To abate lead.
Randy actually put up the numbers last night. I believe it was $130 represented 3 hours of city time, and then everything else was like the swabs, FedExing it to the lab, and stuff like that. So for what it's worth, Randy has claimed consistently that it's comparable to private sector.
Yeah.
But point is, yeah, they would be, if you rent to someone with a kid 6 or under, you would need to do a $250 test and potentially have to do it again in another 24 months, depending on who's renting.
And most landlords, so when a new tenant goes in, they put a fresh coat of paint in there. But I've seen some of the lead abatement and really wasn't happy with a lot of the tactics that they call lead abatement. Actually, all they do is slap some paint over top of it and keep it moving. Take out the wainscoting and things of that nature, old stuff. But I don't know. It's a cost that eventually has to go to, that will end up on the backs of the renter.
On Chris, I'm definitely on board with Paul. I think he has great ideas with that, and you know, I definitely think it is a problem when we have money that's coming in for the poor parts of town that are just shipped into, once again, for downtown. I don't think we need a new parking garage. You know, if there's people coming from Philly and New York that are looking at, you know, $500,000 condos, they can find a parking spot on Mulberry or somewhere else, just like I do. Third thing with the lead issue. So I've been painting for close to 20 years. I have been lead certified. That might have run out, and I definitely don't represent the company I work for in saying any of this. This is just me. So everyone here lived in houses with lead, and you're all still living here. I mean, I wonder what New York City does with their 9 million people, and you know, any house before 1978 most likely has lead in it. Like Paul said, you know, if anything, you could tell landlords everything needs a fresh coat of paint, which most of them do. Creating a new ordinance, I mean, I could tell you right now, I could just go to, if you come to my house, which is built in 1905, I can tell you for free that there's lead somewhere in it. I don't need to pay someone $250 or whatever it is to figure that out. The main concern with anything with lead, and the company I work for, we're very conscientious about this, is anytime there's, with children, is anytime of preparation, everything needs to be, we use plastic, we use anything to really stop the flow of any type of dust particles or anything like that. That's the main thing. That's when kids are really susceptible to all of this stuff at a certain age when they're young, like someone said, like 5, 6 years old. That's the main concern. But what happens with these government programs, you lose the original intent of what it's for, and you hear about cases where the EPA comes out. I heard about one recently where empty house, no one's even living in it, and the EPA is just spying on this place, and they're gonna find the heck out of some company. There's no kids there, but you know what I mean. The original intent was we need to keep the main thing, which is making sure we're protecting the little babies, which I do when I'm on the job, and we need to make sure any landlord, any contractor, like when you're working on windows and there's kids, you need to have lots of plastic. I mean, and tape, and take your time. That's the main thing, but all that gets lost in government regulation. It becomes just this big, it becomes like the hum of an air conditioner. It's just completely meaningless, and just rules and regulations and fines, and it doesn't mean anything. And so that's my take on the lead thing.
All right, if we have no more questions, this was supposed to be a good meet and greet, but a lot of people had questions, which was really good. Does anybody else have anything else that they would like to ask? Or do we just?
I'll ask you. In your last statement, the two of you both kind of alluded to it, but I wanted to know, what do you consider your greatest strength, and what asset do you see yourselves bringing to a seat on City Council?
My greatest strengths, I feel, come from my father. He was raised by his grandfather in Utuado, Puerto Rico. He taught me to keep my word. One of the main things I got from my dad, he never had empty words. And what I mean by that was, if he told you something, he meant every word of it. And really, I mean, he was the kindest person I ever knew. But like, I couldn't come here in front of anybody, and part of it's that Puerto Rican pride, coming in, but I couldn't just tell you something I didn't mean. And so I feel that's my greatest strength, for better or for worse, even if it gets me in trouble. And sometimes I do stuff that, might cause some controversy or whatever. If I say something, I mean every bit of it. You may say, well, you're wrong about that. Well, maybe I am, but at least I mean it. So that would be my greatest strength.
For me, it's 45 years of where the rubber meets the road at. I was here through the whole process. My strength on city council would be my knowledge about the funding streams, you know, CDBG, FEMA, all that other stuff, because running organizations, you had to be pretty familiar with that. My knowledge and my history, the history that I know about what has been tried here before. Every 4 years, the same thing gets reintroduced. It just gets packaged a little different, but it gets reintroduced. And I can give you an example. The example would be the economic development study. You know, I was here when the 2004 economic development study came out, and then the 2009, and then 2012, and now the 2016. And these economic studies say the same thing. They say the same. The Southeast area's study hasn't changed since 2004. You know, the things that's needed here are still needed here, which means the last 12 years nobody's taking notice to that. But that's what I bring to City Council. As I said earlier, you just can't tell me that you're giving me steak and I know it's ground beef, because that's what's been happening here. And somebody needs to tell it, no, enough's enough, and we need to take a stand, and now's the time with this new mayor.
And I just want to thank Darlene, and really, I mean, she really didn't have to do this. With the registration you guys have, you could completely ignore us, and no one would even, a lot of people wouldn't even care. So I really, really appreciate the opportunity, because this is like really the post-primary, I mean, I'm out and about talking to people, but this is the only opportunity we've really had in a public thing like that. So I really, really appreciate it.
I echo his sentiments.
Well, yeah. Well, we do thank everybody for coming out. South End's goal is to empower our neighborhoods, and we know that happens through education. So we need to, we want to engage more people in the political process. And if we don't open that up, we don't do that. And we know that as we go door to door knocking, we have to put everything on the table to get people to get educated so they can become more part of the political process and know what is happening in our city and how we make those changes. So that's what South End and organization was when we said, let's have a debate. That was our goal. So we thank you for coming.
Yes.
Our counterparts declined on us. We did get an official notice yesterday in the mail that said they would not be here. So they did let us know that yesterday. So, we do know that. But we thank you. We're just going to ask if you have any closing remarks that you would like to make. We'll give that to you. We do have some refreshments over there. You're welcome to it. And again, we thank everybody for coming out.
It might very well be because there's nothing being done here. They may not know how to get here.
Might be something we don't know now. So if you have any remarks, fine. Okay. So then we just thank everybody for coming.